So as I said, welcome to Council's. This is our third public meeting for the our business plan and budget for our 2021 budget. Obviously, we're doing them a little bit differently via Zoom at the moment. So first of all, my name's Tash Hunt and I'm Council's Community Engagement Officer. Now, before we start, I'd like to acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of the land and the waters of the land on which we meet today. We pay respect to elders both past, present and future. And I acknowledge that could be all different tribes depending on where you're zooming in from tonight. So I'd like to acknowledge the VIPs in the room, which of course is our residents and ratepayers that have zoomed in. But I might also introduce our elected members. We've got Mayor Glenn Rowlands has joined us and Councillor David Olsen. Now, I can't see if anyone else has joined in, but at the previous sessions, we've also had our Deputy Mayor Simon Rothwell, Councillor Peter O'Neill, Councillor Leon Zarens, Councillor Alistair Christie, Councillor Davina Quirk, Councillor Bruce Spilsbury, and Councillor Bill Verweg. Also joining us tonight is our Chief Executive Officer, Nigel Morris, and Andy Baker, our Chief Operating Officer, and Gary Lewis, Chief Financial Officer. So welcome everyone. Now, my role today is to keep things on time, keep us on track, and make sure that we're here and we just stay on track talking about our annual business plan and budget. So if you've got any issues for council outside of this scope, I please ask you to hold them and you can contact myself or one of my colleagues after tonight. Now, as you can see, tonight's session is being recorded and it will be posted on Council's Your Say site. So I'll go through a couple of tips for using Zoom if you're a first timer. First of all, can you please put your mobile phone to silent if you have one with you? But I do ask that you keep it with you because we'll be asking you to use it in the session. Now, we are simulating a public meeting, so it would be great if you're comfortable to leave your cameras on so we can see each other's faces. And in saying that, you are on film then, so if you do need to take a bathroom break or get up, please turn your camera off just so it's not distracting. We don't want anyone to get YouTube famous like the poor girl that took her laptop with her to the bathroom on YouTube. Now, while the presentation's going on, we will ask everyone to mute themselves. So if you're currently not muted, please do so. You can do that by the bottom menu down your left. There's a little microphone. And if you don't mute yourself, I'll get Nigel to mute everyone else. Now, up at the top right-hand side of your screen, there may be an option to change your view from either speaker view or gallery view, which is more, looks like the Brady Bunch. Also, you've got the presentation up there, so you can change your view around a little bit. If your screen name is not your name, feel free to change it. You can click on the three dots next to your name and type in what your name is. Just makes it a little bit easier for us when we're referring to you. Now, if there's any technical difficulties throughout the night, please be patient and just try to re-enter the meeting and we'll get our meeting organiser to admit everyone as soon as possible. Now, the format for today, my very long-winded introduction by myself, will be shortly handing over to Mayor Glenn Rowlands for a welcome. Then a presentation of the budget by Council's Chief Financial Officer, Gary Lewis. A presentation on major projects by our General Manager, Andy. And then what we'll be doing is raising questions by text message and a question and answer session. And at the end of the session, you'll have time to verbally share any comments with us. So now, we're doing things a little bit differently. So I'd like you to take a moment, and if you have your mobile phone, grab it. And can you please jot down the number that's on the screen, which is 0437 018 916. Now, at any time during the session today, if you come up with some questions, you're most welcome to text them through to this number, and we'll attempt to address them tonight. Why we're asking you to text that message through is it's going straight into our engagement site, Your Say Yankalilla, so all the messages are recorded and then will be reported to Council. Now, if you've got questions that are unrelated to the budget, I won't be covering them tonight, or as in next year's budget, I won't be covering them tonight. And you're welcome to put any feedback on there as well. Now, if you want to see the conversation as the night's going on, if you're on a laptop or a phone, you can always minimise your Zoom screen and go to the web address right down the bottom of the screen here, which is Your Say Yankalilla. I've put the link direct into the project, but if you just go to yoursayyankalilla.com.au, you can then navigate down and where it says annual business plan and budget, then click on go to the forum, and you'll actually be able to see live any text messages that come through. So I'll be monitoring them, and I'll be putting the mayor through his paces a little bit later and reading those messages out to him. Now, if you don't have the ability to do a text message, you can actually email us as well to consultation@yankalilla.sa.gov.au. And at the end of the presentation, we'll show you a slide, and it explains ways that you can also do written submissions, which have actually extended the date on that, which will now be until the 10th of June. Now, also there's a little tool in Zoom on the right-hand bottom menu, which is your hand signals or reactions button. So if you have a question when we go to question answers right at the end, you can use that hand signal to signify that you want to say something. I'd like to encourage you to use this opportunity to listen, learn. There may be ideas and opinions that could be different to your own, and we ask that you all agree to be respectful to one another and to everyone. And feel free to give me a nod of agreement, or you can test out your reaction button down the bottom there with either a thumbs up or a wave, that we all do agree to be very respectful tonight. I'll remind you as well that all the text messages that come through are automatically filtered for profanity, and you can't name a person directly. So please, again, keep your comments respectful, as I know you will. Now, finally, we're on track to, the presentation of the official part should only take about an hour, so we'll try and stick to that time frame. And now I will hand over to Mayor Glenn Rowlands to officially commence the formalities.
All diesel trains are now back in operation.
A teenage boy has been arrested after crashing a car at Forktree Road.
Hello everyone, thanks Tash. Good evening everyone, and welcome to the District Council's draft budget presentation. In these unprecedented times, we are all having to make adjustments to the way we do things, and instead of travelling roadshow to meet with you, here we are via technology. There are many advantages of technology, but I do miss the face-to-face interaction with you. This year's budget process started like those previously, November, December, asking staff for their budget requirements and put it together using previous community feedback and suggestions. But oh boy, did we have a surprise. February came to us and much more in March, and that changed everything. I'll leave it up to you to hear the presentation, but we need to know what your thoughts are, as we have to provide for those people who are in business badly affected by COVID-19 shutdown. Also those who are having financial difficulties. We may have to make a substantial contribution for them to get back on their feet. This would be the most difficult budget I've had to deliberate over in my 6 years on council. We also have substantial projects you would like us to deliver, like the Community Hub Library or the Surf Life Saving Club. The CE has had one unsuccessful grant funding application and is now applying for another. What do you want us to do? If there's no government funding to help pay for the projects, do you want us to proceed or not? The question's there, and we'd love to have your feedback. The budget that Gary's about to present to you is worst case. Therefore, it hasn't got a provision of funding in there from the government. And understanding the facts is essential. If you're not sure, please ask questions. I'll leave it there for now, and I do invite you to ask those questions as we go, as we get to the end and before you leave. And if you want to discuss a bit further, please come back to us. So, Gary, over to you. Or is it back to Tash?
No, I'll take it from here. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so welcome to the draft annual business plan and budget for 2020 to 21. We're considering this to be a plan for what is certainly an uncertain year. So just to give you a snapshot of what's been happening at the council, largely in response to the coronavirus. Council offices have been closed for a number of weeks. A number of staff, where possible, were working from home. But broadly, we've still been offering all the same services, except where face-to-face meetings were critical. There's been an awful lot of video meetings such as this going on around council and with our community and our business partners. Fortunately, we can state that we're actually looking at opening our council offices on Monday now. That might be slightly limited services, but the goal at the moment is to have council offices open on Monday. And when we look at our depot services, that basically has not changed in that they've offered all the same services throughout this period. They had to change their operating procedures to build in social distancing where possible, but basically they've delivered all the normal services and reasonably successfully as well, we feel. Now, the Jetty Caravan Park has been closed for a lot of the recent weeks. It has opened. It opened on Monday, and there's a small amount of activity down there at the moment. But there are significant challenges ahead. We don't know what next year is going to bring for the Caravan Park, but we are very pleased it's open. When we first started preparing this budget, obviously we had no idea coronavirus was going to happen. For a lot of the planning over the last couple of months, we've been considering the possibility that the Caravan Park will be shut for the year. So, things have got a little bit better. But regardless of that, it's still an uncertain year. For those of you who attended our roadshow last year, I think you may recognise this slide. And we've kept it in there because it describes something which is still there. It's a continuous balancing act, and these are the levers that we can control. We can pull and push these levers as we build our budget. We have revenue, we have rates, we decide what we will do with those. We have a level of projects. Do we do more projects, less projects? We can alter the level of service that we offer. And what comes out at the back of that is a level of borrowings. Do we borrow more or do we borrow less? Do we repay debt? We're presenting a one-year budget here, which is a product of all these balancing these factors. But we also have to look into the medium term and the long term. And we look at both the 5-year and the 10-year future when we're considering our current budget. It is always a balancing act. On the left-hand side, there's things we can do which would not be popular. We don't want to do. We don't want to increase rates, decrease services, or decrease projects. On the right-hand side, there's lots of things we'd love to do. Decrease rates, increase services, increase the projects. Unfortunately, if we do all the nice things on the right-hand side, we will not make enough money to pay for the services we deliver, and we will be in deficit, and we will struggle to maintain our assets, and our borrowings will go up. The budget process is always a balancing act, and that's why it's really critical we get your feedback. We will do the balancing act, but we need to know if we've gone too far one way or the other, and you can give us that feedback today about the projects, the rates, how we go. So when we started this budget, as the Mayor said, we had no idea coronavirus was going to happen. We were looking at efficiencies and savings, but in a very different world. In response to the position that Council has been in over the last year, but very specifically in response to the coronavirus and the impacts and the forecast impacts for the economy, Council's response has been to slash its costs. On the right-hand side of this presentation, you'll see a chart which, on the left-hand side of that chart, we show that rates will go up. At the moment, we're proposing rates will go up by a small amount. User charges will go up by a little bit. Grants, unfortunately, won't go up very much at this point, but we will be cutting our employee costs and cutting other contracting and material costs quite significantly when we compare to the current year's budget to next year's. The executive team have all agreed to not get any pay rise to cover inflation, CPI. We're reducing overtime across the organisation. That there is some key overtime that has to occur, but by and large, overtime is not going to happen next year. Staff levels are lower, and our operating budgets are significantly cut. However, we're still planning on delivering all the key strategic projects that we've been asked to deliver. And we're also planning on maintaining our operational capabilities so that we're still going to have the ability to deliver services, but we're not going to be able to do them to the same degree and the same agility and flexibility that we have in previous years. We have driven efficiencies throughout the organisation over the last four to 5 years. Some of those were internal operating savings, but more recently, as the low-hanging fruit have been cleared up, when we look for strategic sources for efficiencies, we've come towards shared services. And this is where we run joint operations with other councils, or where we leverage off other councils' core skill sets and teams to actually find more efficient ways of delivering the services we do. One of the challenges of a small council is to be as efficient as a large council. One of the advantages in a small council is that we can be very agile in a way a large council can't be. So the challenge for us is to try and achieve those efficiencies without losing agility. And one of the key ways of doing that has been through the use of shared services. Underpinning our current cost-cutting exercises is a number of shared service agreements with councils. But we look for future efficiencies as well, and where we're going to find those in future years. And now there are challenges in extending these relationships further. And one thing we're flagging is the shared services underpin the cost cutting we're doing now. But if we're going to continue to do that, we will need to potentially invest further in the council's administrative operations if necessary. So if we look at the high level of the budget that we're proposing, on the left-hand side with the grid with the numbers, this is the budget for 2020 and 21. And we're comparing it to the current budget, 1920. So the left-hand column, we're suggesting we're looking at operating revenues of 13.59 million, with operating expenses of 13.766 million. And that will leave us with a deficit for the year of $176,000. We're also looking at a capital renewal budget of $2.454 million and a budget for new capital projects of $1.993 million. On the screen, you can see comparisons to the current year's budget. What I draw your attention to the right-hand side, the table or the graph on the right-hand side of the slide. This is our forecast for the remaining, for the next 10 years, of the next 5 years, my apologies. On the left-hand side, we have the current year, 1920, which is showing a significant deficit. We're forecasting a dramatically reduced deficit for 2021 in this budget, that we expect that deficit will decrease rapidly again in the following year, and that we should be comfortably in surplus in 22-23. And we believe that if we're very diligent in driving efficiencies and cautious with our budgeting, that we can continue to grow that surplus for the foreseeable future. And that means that we believe we're strongly sustainable. One of the questions that often comes up in budget meetings and discussions on finance is the difference between capital and operational expenditure. And I've been asked to talk a little bit about that to help clarify that. From an accounting perspective, if that's of any interest to anyone, a capital expenditure is not really a consumption of money. It's a change in the nature of our assets. We start off with a cash asset, $1 million in the bank, and we convert that into a building or a road asset because nothing's consumed, it's just changed. So when we look at our operating budget, operational expenditure is things that are consumed. Utilities, waste management, when we run events, or basic maintenance that we do on our buildings and roads. This is our core operating expenditure. Whereas our capital expenditure is generally money spent on building or major assets. It's the major annual roadworks, buildings when we extend buildings or do major refurbishments of them, and it's the sealing of unsealed roads and building of bridges. And it's important to point out that the capital expenditure doesn't form part of our operating statement. So there's a question that we get asked is, where does the income come from for funding our capital expenditure? We have operating income, which goes into operating expenses, but we don't report any capital income. To explain that, we need to talk about the subject of depreciation. Renewal expenditure is basically the fixing of assets that we currently have, which degrade over time. And that degrading of those assets is measured in our accounts by something we call depreciation, which is just a financial measure of the loss of value of those assets. But depreciation is not a cash expense. So when we look to our operating statement, there's an expense in there which does not represent cash. But if we have enough income coming in to cover that expense, then that means we have sufficient income to pay for the renewal capital expenditure, the maintenance of our core assets. That explains how we afford the work on our existing assets, but it doesn't cover how we build new assets. And when we build new assets, we look to debt to fund them. People talk about the idea of what is good debt and bad debt as being fundamental to whether we should use debt. So we start off by looking at what do people think of as good debt and bad debt, and it is a subjective judgment. Typically, though, what we would say is that good debt is debt that's used to buy or build an investment that will pay a return. In commercial terms, your investments want to cover at least the debt repayment and the interest expense so you can make a profit out of it. Whereas bad debt is money that you borrow to pay for consumption that you can't afford at the time, or to buy an asset that doesn't actually return enough to pay for itself. These ideas make a lot of sense in the commercial environment, but for a government, a lot of our assets don't return a financial value directly. They certainly don't return a value to council, into our accounts, but they do have social and community values, which are core to what we do. And the end result of this is when we build a new community asset, one that doesn't pay a financial return to us, it's likely that that will be funded through increases in rates in the future. And it's one of the challenges that we have. That said, some of our assets, some of council's assets will pay a financial return, and we do have commercial operations which contribute to our accounts. So if we borrow money to pay for a new asset, whatever that may be, the people who are going to pay for it are the people who will repay the loans effectively. This we refer to as intergenerational equity, the idea that user pays. On the screen, we have an example, which I'll just talk you through. Hopefully it's easy enough to follow. In a simple example, we're suggesting that council might build a $1 million asset, whatever it may be. It's a community asset that's going to be used over the next 10 years by our community. The blue line sloping from top left to bottom right represents the current value of this asset. And we're going to say, just for the example sake, that it starts at a value of $1 million, it's got a life of 10 years, and at the end of that 10 years, it's got no value. To build this asset, we borrow $1 million. We would say that that will depreciate in value by $100,000 every year, so that at the end of the 10 years, it's got zero value left in our books. And that's why the blue line slopes down left to right. And that depreciation is shown in the graph as the green lines, as an expense going below the line. But at the same time, we have an additional, as long as we're at a break-even level, then we will have $100,000 left over every year to repay that loan. And that means that that's the yellow line above the line, $100,000 free cash from our operations to repay that loan. It means at the end of that life of that asset, we have no debt, and we have no asset. So we borrow $1 million, build an asset, run it for 10 years, and at the end of that, we're back where we started. And if we want to have that asset again, we can borrow another $1 million and build the asset again. This is a very simplified example, but this is how sustainability works in a local government when we're building new assets and using debt funding for them. Why this is a good thing is that this asset is now used for the next 10 years and the ratepayers pay for it over the next 10 years. So the people living here using the asset will be the people paying for it. It's intergenerational equity. One of the big subjects every year when we talk about our budget and our plans is rates. Every year we increase our rates, and generally this is in response to inflation. We're all aware of inflation. Many of us will get annual pay rises linked to inflation, but we also know our costs go up in line with inflation. Over the last 5 or 6 years, we're aware that we've been trying to reduce the actual level at which we increase rates. If you go back to 2015-16, there was a 4% rate rise there, and that has come down every year. In 1920, we're a little bit above the previous year, but we're bringing that down again this year. When we look at how we fared versus inflation, we think that we've raised rates significantly lower than inflation over that period of time. It is a little bit subjective, and how you do that comparison, people do it in different ways, but we think we're doing a good job versus when we look at the real underlying increase in our rates. And that we're showing on the right-hand side of this chart, where the green lines are the headline figure that we put rates up by, 4% dropping down to a possible rate of just over 1% for this year. The pale blue lines are the inflation over that period of time. And the yellow line is what I'm referring to as the real rate, which is the headline rate less inflation. This year, in 1920, we've been the first year after we sold the CWMS assets, and that has left us a little hole in our income. We were aware that we would earn less in rates, but we also that there was a gain for our ratepayers. But we've had to address that. This year, we're presenting a draft budget which is based on a rate rise of 1.05%, and that figure is 1/2 of CPI as it is in the latest figures. We believe that even though this is much lower than inflation, we believe that we can be sustainable in the long term with a rise this low. Again, this slide and the next slide, people may recognize from last year. We would have put a very similar slide up last year. And that's because our finances are very similar to last year, and they don't change very often. 82% of our income comes from rates. It's very important to us. It's the basic operating source of income for us, and that is unlikely to change. In this slideshow, the yellow section of user charges, that's basically our income from the Caravan part and a few other bits and pieces. And the other key source of income is our grants and subsidies. We do not think that our operating grants are likely to change, although we are chasing a lot of capital grants, but they don't come into this chart. The income from our Caravan part we will discuss in a later slide. Our operating expenses, again, the mix of these is very consistent year on year. We have the costs are equally split between employee costs and materials contracts and the other main cost in there is depreciation on our assets, which is our source, relates to our renewal expenditures as well. We do not see any likelihood that these will change significantly. I've mentioned the Jetty Caravan Park a few times. Jetty Caravan Park closed in March and it's just reopened this year. When we were looking at how we were going to budget it for next year, we had to make assumptions. We don't know what will happen. We don't know the extent of business we're going to get there. We don't know how much of the year it will be open. So what we've said in this budget is we're going to assume it's business as usual. but we also acknowledge it's a very uncertain future. When we look at the risks attached to a caravan park, we know there are some costs which can't be avoided. There are some fixed costs which will not vary regarding on whether it's open or closed or the level of business. In our budget at the moment, the caravan park contributes $350,000 to the bottom line. Expenses less, income less expenses. It's $350,000. We are hopeful that we will achieve something like that, but we really don't know what the year is going to hold. Now, we're going to look at some of the projects we're planning to do over the next year. And to start with, I'm going to hand over the first few of these to the Chief Operating Officer, who will take you through the top few of these. If I can hand over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Gary. I'll just quickly run through the operating projects that we've got this year. From the top, we've got the planned bridge maintenance project. That's to undertake bridge maintenance where works have been identified through our bridge inspection report. And they include the Maiponga Heritage Bridge down at Maiponga Beach. There's a load and assessment, structural assessment work going on there. We've also got the Jetty Caravan Park bridges, and there's 2 bridges in the Jetty Caravan Park. There's one road bridge and one footbridge, and we're doing load assessments on that bridges, or them bridges as well. Then we move on to the water main investigations. Well, these investigations have come about due to the fact we've done a few projects recently where we attempted to re-seal roads, and we've found that water mains are not as low as they probably should be, and it's caused us major problems. So now we're going to run a project where we can investigate the depth of those, the current water infrastructure in the township roads, to determine the viability of whether we seal or don't seal that road, or whether we engage with SA Water to look at a different methodology. Rapid Bay and Second Valley water treatment is another line where we still run a very, very small CWMS system outside of those townships, and that money's set aside to undertake maintenance on Second Valley and Rapid Bay water treatment plants. The place space inspection and maintenance program, that's 25k, and that's to introduce a formal preventative maintenance program, but it's also to engage external audits alongside that, and that's something that council don't readily audit themselves. They have to get external auditors to do that, and so that program gets brought through that project as well. Then we've got the Normanville Foreshore Master Plan, and everybody's probably aware that we're just starting to go through that now and beginning to model and master plan that future build. That's something that's definitely at front of mind.
I'll talk about the other projects there. There's the Arts and Cultural Officer, and this is the budget to continue the partnership with Country Arts SA and the City of Victor Harbor for an arts officer within the district. She works for us in an equivalent of 2 days per week, and she will continue to chair the Arts and Cultural Committee, running art displays and other projects within the district. There's the community grants, which in previous years, Council has allocated funding to a number of community bodies, Maiponga Community Centre, Yankalilla Memorial Park, the New Year's Pageant, Fleury Festival, and the individual grants to support youth and community initiatives. This has changed slightly for next year with the COVID-19 pandemic. There are restrictions in place which will impact community groups and events, and therefore, rather than allocating blanket funding, it's proposed that a pool of grant funding is made available, and clubs, event organisers and individuals can apply throughout the year for funding. Funds will be allocated under council resolution. There's a new policy to be developed to support that. Early childhood and STEM. This is the library introduced a story time to the community back in November 17 to support our early childhood literacy state strategy. And the program was provided weekly. the libraries began supporting STEM. STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering and Maths. So they supported this initiative in 2016 and now provide STEM-based programs such as the Little Bang Discovery Club and Plus to both the community and reception classes at the Yankalilla Area School. These programs are 4 and 6 weeks respectively and are designed to build on previous learnings for our junior discoverers and their adult co-learners, exploring new topics that develop their science skills further. What's Up? What is What's Up? It's a project that will consist of several small projects showing council as a leader in supporting the state government in the reduction and banning of single-use plastics within our district. Promoting, educating and encouraging and working with the community to consider their use of plastics and how to introduce compostable replacement products. The group consists of staff and the natural resource members and elected members. And there's also the on-demand transport. And this is an alternative that's been put forward to replace the community bus that's been used in the past. And this option would utilize the CHISP cars, which we currently have, and provide an on-demand service Monday to Friday through a combination of budget allocation and client contribution. Obviously, you can give your feedback on what you think of these projects, if you like them, or you think we should do more of them through the channels that have been listed before. We'll go on to asset management projects. These are where the money we spend on capital expenditure to maintain our asset base that we currently have. And I will hand back once again to our Chief Operating Officer to give you all the information.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Yeah, the first one in the list there is bridge replacement. We've now got a bridge program, and that bridge program came about late last year, and to look at all the bridges in the area, and this in particular is to design for a replacement for 2 bridges. One's in Blockers, which is down at Myponga, and the other one's in Blacker Road, which is the Salt Creek area, as part of the council's bridges maintenance program. We found that that was something that was missing before, and it's had to be brought into the equation now, and there's a few bridges we need to look at. The fleet major plant renewal, there's 2 heavy trucks that we are looking to replace this year. They're being replaced because it's their end of life period, and if we don't move them on now, then they just become scrap value. So we'll be looking to replace 2 heavy vehicle trucks this year. The motor vehicle small fleet replacement program, that's 2 office vehicles, and they get used by all the office staff as group vehicles. Where we go out looking at all sorts of things like planning and anything to do with the general environment. Then we've got the sealed roads renewal program. There's 2 parts to this. There's a reseal in the township, and there's a reseal and construction in rural. So there's quite a lot under that bracket. As you can imagine, there's over $1 million in there. And the reseals in the townships are going to be Heathcote Street in Normanville, which will coincide with the roads that we've done just at the side of those. The construction of curbs and gutters, stormwater infrastructure and pavement seals. Then we've got Chemist Street, which comes off there, again at Normanville, for a construction curb, gutter, stormwater and pavement seal again. Then we're looking at St Andrews Boulevard. It's a section near to the Links Clubhouse. We need to do some repair of pavement failures and reseal in a hot mix asphalt. Dump Road in Yankalilla, that needs repairing of the pavement failures. If anybody's been up there to the dump recently, you'll see that it's starting to break away. We're going to repair that road pavement and spray seal. O'Connor Street in Normanville will be resealed with a spray seal, as will Marjorie Street. And Hayflat Road, there's a portion of Hayflat which is going to have a repair of pavement failure and a reseal there as well. Then we moved into, in that same $1 million bucket, into the reconstruction and reseal in the rural side of things. Blockers Road in Maiponga, there's a section there that's going to be in need of repair, and that's failing quite considerably, and we're going to reseal and spray seal that one. Cause Road, there's 3 kilometres of Cause Road that's going to be resealed. Chemysil Road, we're also going to work on Chemysil. There's about 3.5 kilometres of Chemysil, and that's from Wenhams Road to Stockwell Road. Marion Road is going to get about 0.5 kilometre from Chemysil Road to the end. Rakang, again, just over 0.5 k, Range Road west to Taliska, and Tapanapa Road, about 1.5 kilometres there, commencing about 0.5 kilometre west of number 690 to the cattle yards. Hayflat Road, again, there's a section of Hayflat next to Range Road, about 1.2 kilometres that's going to be resheeted. Sampson Road, 2 kilometres section from Reservoir Road. Blockers Road, again, 1.5 kilometres section west of Dodd Road. And Tunkalilla Road, which is around about 1 kilometre section north of Illawong Road.
Again, the last one listed on there is for IT and fixtures and fittings, and this is basically a budget we keep, because every year we know some of our IT equipment will fail, some of our furniture and fixtures and fittings will fail, and so we want to make our budget as realistic as possible, so we keep some budget in there to cover those expenses. We aim to get through the year without spending it though. And we will go on now to our new and upgrade capital projects. These are basically where we're improving an asset we have, or we're building new assets. And we'll hand back straight away to Chief Operating Officer.
I've got that one, Gary, thanks. Yeah, so these are new and upgrading projects. Finnisvale Drive Stormwater, which is at the next stage actually of the culvert upgrade. There's the construction of a new culvert in accordance with the Stormwater Master Plan and Asset Management Plan. We've got Main South Road footpath, and that footpath is from the garden centre up to the and beyond the childcare centre. That's going to be constructed in a hot mix seal, and that's the area where I believe the buses tend to park up and load the kids at the moment, because they're having some work done in their car park. Rapid Bay Bridge. There's a substantial amount of money set aside for the construction of a new bridge in Easington Lewis Drive at Rapid Bay. This has been on my plan for the last 2.5-3 years, and we're finally getting to the end now. The sealed road upgrade of Grundy Street and Forktree Road, the design to align with our enhanced project plan to enable council to access special local roads funding. And the caveat in this pricing is it's indicative with including the Grundy Street one in Second Valley. The 150 is probably aligned more to Forktree, should we get the go ahead with grant funding there. And there'll be another uplift on that for Grundy Street. We're around about 20k. The Second Valley car park area. This is the apron outside of the Second Valley Hall. Again, this is a project that we've looked at for the last 2, maybe nearly 3 years, to give it some delineation and some lines in that space there. But there's no gutter, and people just ride off the road straight into that space. This is to follow on that design work that we undertook in 2019 to construct new curbs and gutters outside the front of the hall. And last but not least is Wilson, Martin and Jervois. Again, we've spoke about this area for quite some time over the last 2 or 3 years. And there's 43,000 now set aside for stage 1 concept design for the drainage and eventual resealing of those roads.
And the last project on there is with regards to the new library building. And we cover that in some slides later on, which we'll talk about in detail. But just encourage you to give us your feedback on all these projects. Your feedback is key to establishing what will happen next year. So I think we went through methods to give you feedback at the beginning, and we'll reiterate those at the end as well. So this is a list of the major strategic capital projects we're looking at over the next 2 years, and some of them were on the preceding slide. This includes the new library building, which is a total cost of $2.2 million. Talk of a new surf lifesaving club, which is a $3.5 million project, but council would pay $1.155 million towards that project. Most of the money will come elsewhere. There's a Forktree Road, net of the grant that we'll get for that, which will have an expenditure in the current year that we're talking about, 2021, but most of the expenditure will sit in the following year, 21-22. And also we have the unidentified stimulus package, which we put in this budget. All these projects are talked about in more detail on later slides, except for the unidentified stimulus package. Basically, this project is a placeholder for something that may happen that we don't know what it is yet. At the moment, federal government and state government are potentially looking to offer significant grants to local government to help stimulate the economy. If we are to apply for these grants in the next year or the year after, we need to show that we've planned to do it. We need to show that it's within our actual financial planning and that we're ready to go. So we've put this in there at this point as a placeholder to show that we're considering the impacts of it and to get your feedback as well. And the other projects there, we'll talk about in a bit more detail. So the library project, I will give you some information on this. The Community Library Action Group, CLAG, was formed and worked with council members and staff to determine the permanent location and size for the library. An extension of the centre of 500 square metres has been approved in principle by the council, and draft plans provided by the group, CLAG, and costings undertaken for the building, its fittings for the library and the resurfacing of the road and parking area. The centre will be used for many community activities, including activities for the youth, with the support of the Yankalilla Lions Club. A new building will enable a library to continue its significant upward trend and demand for its services, including its loan facilities, free PC and Wi-Fi use, Wi-Fi printing, room hires, local history programs, and not to forget the home library service and providing a place to be. 2 grant funding opportunities were identified. We've learned recently that one of those is unsuccessful, but we are still hoping to be successful with a second grant funding application, which has closed, and we're hoping to hear in the next few months whether that's been successful or not. And now we refer 50% of the cost. The budget figures we have presented today, as the Mayor said, do not include that grant funding. It's a worst case scenario. If I'll hand over this slide to the Chief Operating Officer, who will talk about the next few projects on the slides.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, the first one is another big one, which is the Surf Lifesaving Club, which is a lot of people talking about at the moment, and which is good. Council have currently got 5 options of where to possibly place this building on the foreshore. Those 5 options are written into the last council meeting, if you'd like to go and see where they are. In a nutshell, there's one where we split the 2 buildings. So the kiosk goes down to the southern end where the boat ramp is, and at the northern end, or where the kiosk is now, will be the Surf Lifesaving Club. We've also got one where the Surf Lifesaving Club stays where it is and doesn't move from that location and gets redeveloped there. And there's 2 or 3 more that actually get filtered into that. So it's definitely worth having a look at what we were doing there. Once council's determined what those options are, and we'll nail them down to the last 2 or 3 ones that are more current to what people's thoughts are, then we will bring that back, and then we'll go out to the community and we'll do a consultation on that piece. Just to finish off on that as well, you can stay there, Gary. You're okay. It's just to finish off on that. We are going through at the moment a structural review with the current building, just to sign that off to let everybody know where that is at the moment structurally, and also we're looking at a coastal review as well about the whole sea level rise and setback that we would need to look at if we were going to build a building in any of that vicinity. So I'm actually initiating that as we speak as well. So Forktree Road, council are currently seeking funding through the Special Local Roads Programme. This is a programme that all the Florio councils get involved in and beyond. And this is to seal the last unsealed section of Forktree Road between Main South Road and Reservoir Road. And that's that red section you can see dotted in the plan in front of you there. This section of Forktree will form the last part of the sealed ring that will go around the reservoir as well. And that sealed ring is really important when we bring people to look at this whole environment now that the reservoir is open, and it gives somebody an easy access route all the way around to have a look at that. Sealing this section of Forktree will also provide that fully sealed, safer route and decrease ongoing road maintenance costs. At the moment, we spend an awful lot of money maintaining that road through the grading program and drainage program, and sealing that road will save us lots of money. It's envisaged that the project will look to take 2 years to complete, and this will be the first year coming up where the 150,000 would be looking at that fully completed design. And the Normanville Township Service Station site, and it is a site now. There is no building on that site now. That building no longer exists, as most people on the presentation will have noted. It's an incredibly large area, which is great, which is what we wanted, and you can see way beyond to the big tree that you can just see in the distance there now. So it's opened that whole site up. Consultation for this is going to occur next year, 2021 to 2021, and we will be looking at what the general public would like to see on that site. Currently, on the left, you'll see there's the old service station building, and on the right, which is a bit of a mock-up diagram of it taken away and a few little trees and bushes and things. We won't be putting trees on there before anybody asks, but we will be rolling grass out there so you can see and utilize that space until we come together and decide what it's going to be.
Thank you, Andy. So why is this a plan for such uncertain times? We're continuing to build the assets that the community are asking for. We're continuing to deliver on the key goals. We are looking to achieve break even in our finances more quickly than we had originally forecast following the transfer of CWMS assets. We're keeping that rate rise as low as we can, and obviously we'll chase for as many grants as possible. We are still planning to invest in the area, and that's what we're showing on the grid on the right hand side. These are our capital expenditure programs where we are going to continue to build whilst actually cutting our operating expenditure and defending and supporting our sustainability. So how does this work? How are we going to build the assets? I think we talked about debt earlier on. So yeah, we'll come back there now. The local government authority recommends that our financial liabilities remain under 100% of income. That's basically saying that our total value of debt be less than our total income. And this is a common ratio that's used to measure our level of debt in council. On the right-hand side, we show our neighbours, other councils who have similar environments to work in as we do. Alexandrina has 87% debt, Victor Harbour 46%, Kangaroo Island 99%, Onkaparinga, 79%. Yankalilla, we're forecasting at the end of the year to be about 53% debt. We're actually in a strong position in terms of our balance sheet. Starting in our position, we can afford to take on more debt to fill, to build these new assets. So what happens in the future? Our sustainability does need to be looked at in consideration of our level of debt. So this chart shows, to the left-hand side of the chart, we show the history of our debt in the past, and to the right-hand side, we show our predictions in the future. We have had high levels of debt. If you go back to 2010 and 11, our debt reached 140%, which is higher than the LGA's recommended level. But it's not necessarily a problem. It's just higher than the recommended level. Now that debt was brought down to about 20% reasonably rapidly, and that was possibly funded by a reduction in the capital expenditure program. There was less money spent on maintaining our infrastructure over that period of time. In the last few years, it has started to go up, and a lot of that money has been invested in our roads and our transport infrastructure. With the projects we're suggesting in this draft budget, our debt will continue to go up. Our debt, though, we would estimate will peak at about 94% in the next 4 to 5 years. And most importantly of all, that debt will start to fall. And it's that decrease in debt in the long term shown by the red arrow, which really indicates that we can be sustainable at that level of investment in our infrastructure. But to be honest, our budget will be tight. It's a difficult budget to achieve, and there are challenges for the operation, for the administration to deliver these. But we can do it. We're confident that this can be done. I think that comes to the end of my presentation on the finances and the budget, and I'm going to hand back to Tash, who will take the rest.
Thank you for that presentation. So now, guys, I can see I've got about 4 questions come through on the text line, but if anyone else would like to ask us a question, please text the number that's on your screen now. If you don't have text facilities, you can alternatively email to our consultation@Yankalilla email address there. So I'm going to start with our first question that was received, which was, so Mayor Glenn Rowlands, I'll put the questions through you if that's okay, and you can answer them yourself or choose to direct them how you see fit. This presentation is far too complicated. Figures are being portrayed to confuse the listener. Question: how will council deal with the imminent depression that is approaching our society?
Nigel, would you like to pick that one up, please?
And I might just add, because I've got a question that's similar, so Nigel can kind of answer the two at the same time. There's another question that came in saying, given the significant economic hit due to COVID-19, what provisions are you building in for an increase in outstanding rates? And are you concerned about this when contemplating these considerable borrowings for major projects like the library and the Self-Life Saving Club?
I think the second one I'll give to Gary. The first one, I think I'll take it to Nigel, if I could, please.
I think I might contribute to both those questions at the same time. But first of all, we do need to take into consideration everything that's going on at present. We need to work out what is affordable, but what also we need to do for the community to stay sustainable, not only for the immediate term, but for the longer term. Council have put in some provisions for the current rates that are due, and that's on our COVID-19 website, which we can download for that. And Council's also going to meet again in August to talk about some of the long-term provisions. And it is a strange and difficult balancing act that needs to occur, in that we also can't just grind everything to a halt, because we want this community to generate jobs. And that's why we are looking at promoting some of the strategic projects and putting in some capital funding as well. One of the other things that Council did was to say, with any of these projects that we do, make sure that there's local components, local suppliers and local contractors which are used in that building as well. it is a complicated process, and I know that Gary has presented a lot of facts and figures, but we also welcome additional questions and to sit down and go through it in more detail. We also strongly encourage you to read the whole annual business plan and budget document, which is located on the website. I'm going to switch over to Gary to expand upon that at all, and then I'll just get Tash to read out the question again in case we've missed any components of that.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. Gary?
Yeah, look, to follow on from Nigel, I think he's covered most of the relevant facts. We're not at this point too concerned about the negative impacts on our income. That has been allowed for in what we're presenting here today. Some of those costs will be in there, but that's not going to impact us severely. The main thing that we wanted to address is by putting forward as low a rate rise as possible to help people out. And that's why we're targeting a rate rise below CPI. And beyond that, it is a balancing act between wanting to keep the processes going to stimulate the local economy and to keep driving forward, but also acknowledge that times could be very tough in the next few years. It is a balancing act.
Yeah, thank you. I might just put a little bit in too, if I could, and just ask a question at the end of either of Gary or Nigel. Yes, for that person who texted in about the complication or the complicated presentation, this is a complicated way we actually need to budget, because there are two separate budgets we look at. One is the operation, that is the maintenance and that of the assets and running of the operation overall. The other one, and if I'm wrong saying this, Gary and Nigel, please correct me, but the projects are the ones that we would really like you to concentrate on, because the projects is where a lot of our debt will actually be generated from. Are you comfortable with that or not? And if you've got suggestions and of how we can actually achieve something or not, you don't like us to achieve some of these things, please let us know, because it is very important. 9 of us sit around the table to deliberate over all this, to make a decision on your behalf, and so the more information we get back, the better off we are. So, Gary, for these people, if they were looking at something that they really want to concentrate on and not get too bogged down in the overall finance, what would you suggest that they need to concentrate on?
Mayor, I would reiterate and support what you said, is that the projects, the new projects and the strategic projects, that drives our debt in the future. And it's the feedback on those projects that we're planning for next year. If you want them, if they're important, then tell us. And if you don't think we should be doing them, tell us. We can deliver them, and we can be sustainable if we deliver them, but it will create debt. So yeah, your feedback from the community is absolutely critical.
Thank you. Further questions, Tash?
Seems to be a serious problem with the assumption that the debt that occurs from funding capital projects is repaid over time by those who use the assets developed. The debt is repaid by all ratepayers regardless of whether they use the asset or not. As such, it becomes critical to ensure widespread support for a majority of ratepayers. Ask ratepayers if they want these strategic capital projects or reduce rates over the next 10 years. If council is confident a majority of ratepayers want to contribute towards these projects, why not make it an optional levy or crowdfund them?
Chief Executive.
First of all, I'll just talk about the rates burden, which Gary was talking about before. What he's saying is that we spread the costs over 10 years so that we don't just spend, using his, sorry about the darkness, the $1 million just in 1 year. So we will borrow $1 million, for example, pay it over 10 years, and the ratepayers that are still here over the 10 years will pay it, regardless of whether they use it or not. The rates is actually a tax, so it's not a user pay system, and unfortunately it is applied to all ratepayers. But this is why these sessions and going to the community and asking, do you want this project or not, is critically important to work out, is that the consensus of the ratepayer base that they want the project or not? And that's why we're here to ask.
Thank you. I think the person who sent that in put some very good advice for other ratepayers, Tash, so that was well done. Thank you.
So the next question was, where can we see all the options for the Surf Life Saving Club?
Chief Executive.
That was presented at the April meeting. Yes, the last meeting of council. If you go onto the website and look for agendas and meetings, it's there. I'm also happy if they just text me their email address. I will send that out. I also just want to expand upon what Andy was saying before. He said that there is 5 locations that we're looking at. It is 5 options that we're considering, and one of those options is to just renovate. So it's not a new location as well. I just wanted to add that in while I had the opportunity.
Thank you.
Can you please provide a status update on the Marina Barina Cove, please?
Yep. Tash did ask whether this was a budget question, and I thought, well, it is a budget question, because if council was to do anything with the marina next year, it would be something that would need to be funded. Now, there is no update on the Marina. What council asked administration to do was to write to the government and to say we would like to be involved in some discussions to see what's going to happen with the marina going forward. COVID-19 occurred after that, and I haven't heard from the state government since that time. So I haven't really got an update, except for we're waiting on the state government to come to the table and have a discussion on the future of it. So no budget complications. Interesting
article in this week's Times for people to read. That's updated me, actually, Nigel, to where some of it is, and so that was quite interesting. Yes.
Right, thank you.
More, Tash?
Next one was, sorry, I'm new to the area, but why is the Surf Life Saving Club being rebuilt? What's wrong with it? It's a big expense, so does it remain justified under COVID-19 economic impact?
Yeah, I can answer a fair bit of that. So they're all the questions that we're actually asking administration to go and find out, so that as we go through the 5 options that Andy and Nigel were talking about, we can make judgment of whether we do remove and rebuild, or whether we renovate, or whether we walk away and say, well, you can operate sufficiently like it is. You might need to do some other things with the investment you were going to put into a new build. So they're all the things that we need to discuss and find out. So I would suggest this person to follow along on the agendas as we go through the next few months.
Yeah, the Surf Lifesaving Club have come to us, and they've got about $2.3 million, which they would like to contribute towards it. They've asked us to contribute $1.1 million towards it. And what we're trying to do is work out, should we invest in a new building, or should we do maintenance for the existing one? There is some Disabled Discrimination Act things that we need to do for the building, including a lift to the 2nd story and so on. So just evaluating all those things.
And I think just to add to that as well, Nigel, this has been a 10-year program from the government through SafeCom, where they've
SafeCom is who, Andy?
SafeCom is basically the Surf Life Saving and Emergency Group.
Thank you.
And they've put buckets of money aside per year, and around our district you'll have seen lots and lots of new Surf Life Saving clubs going up, and the majority of that money gets paid by SafeCom, where the council also put in around about 1/3 of what the overall build cost will be. And now it's moved up the coast. Normanville is now the centre of their focus, and that's why we're at the stage we're at now. But it doesn't mean that we have to go out and do something. It's just on the table.
I might just add to that one of the biggest questions that is about at the moment is, why is a 20-year-old building not as in disrepair that needs to be pulled down and and built from scratch. Now, they're the reports we're actually waiting for, and like Andy said, we're getting engineering reports, etc. Because the moment we start to do a renovation or putting in disabled access, etc., there's quite a few planning rules that come into place. And so we've just got to have all our information correct and, for a bit of an old saying, have our ducks in a row. Thank you. And more, Tash?
Okay, suggestion. I wish to contribute a suggestion for consideration in relation to the community use of the former Normanville service station site. The central location would be ideal for hosting monthly produce markets. The pedestrian crossing provides an element of safety for foot traffic with adequate nearby parking for motorists. The market would be an outlet for local producers and an added attraction for locals and visitors. I welcome council's feedback. Read this suggestion.
If I could start the conversation or the answer on that. When I first became mayor, there was a report put on my table about the Normanville farmers market. A lot of research was put in there by a couple of residents and one of the administration team. The biggest problem there was at that time was someone to head it up. They were looking for money as to employ a manager. The other one was the amount of car parks that would have been taken up if it would have been in the car park behind the old service station. Now that we've actually got an area that, like Andy said, it's going to be grassed up, not this year so much because we're a little bit late in the season, but it will get something green on there. But later on, it will actually get rolled out turf. And so when that happens, while we're still looking at what else it could be used for and going through consultation and planning, etc., yeah, why not? Could quite easily be used like that. I'm not sure whether anyone else want to make some comments, but that's where I'm at with that.
Just to reiterate what you've said, Mayor, we will be going out into consultation on that, so I won't discuss that too much further tonight because you will get a chance in the near future on that one. So the next question that's come through is, when will there be finances allocated to bringing more activities to engage our younger generations and bring in more tourism in our off-season?
Oh, Tash, I think you can answer that one.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Tash?
Obviously, tourism has a limited budget for what we're doing within our means. We're really focusing digitally at the moment, and I can tell you that there was actually a survey done, an independent survey done of all our adjoining councils and how our online presence is, and I can tell you we actually rank the highest of all those people, all the other councils, which was really cool. I'm not sure if Nigel or Andy wants to talk on the budget. As far as the young people, I believe, is there a position budgeted for the youth officer, a small, yeah.
Yep, I can talk on that, but we have shuffled some things around to ensure that we have got a youth officer in the next financial year to start to have a look at some of those activities and to start to bring some stuff in. I think last year we were doing a very successful skate art program where we combined the youth officer and the arts officer together to do a program like that, and it was so great to see the families come out down at the skate park. And I think we're going to be looking at doing some of those future things as well. It is something that is there that we're still working towards. So budget is there, but I like more things. You know, we would always love more budget to do more projects.
Yeah, I think just to add to that as well, we took a bit of a punt with the swimming platform a couple of years ago, and to put something in for that generation, and I think that was a massive success. I know that's out of the summer season, but I think it shows that we can think outside the box and give those generational kids something else to look forward to in Normanville.
To add to that, there has been discussion about mountain bike riding in through the forest. There's been discussion with Ingala Falls, also for motorbikes in that area as well. And when you're starting to work with a government department that like Woods and Forest, you've got a lot of hurdles to jump through. So what we were actually also looking at was there are a couple of areas in our district where the motorbikes do go to, and environmentally it is very unsound. And so to get them into the forest where they can actually have a lot of fun, use a lot of their skills, and we can use it dually for bikes, motorbikes or push bike, would be great. But these things don't just happen overnight, and that was one of my biggest learning curves when I became involved in council. You start the discussion today, and you might see it in 5 or 6 years' time. So the discussion's there. We'll take that on board, and if there's someone out there that can connect and drive some of this, we'd be really pleased to engage with you.
Now, this really leads into another question that we've received, which you've just covered some of it, but I'll read it out anyway.
Tash, could I just add to the Mayor's last comment, please?
Sure.
Yes, David.
Thank
David
you.
Olsen, one of our elected members.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think it's worth mentioning at the moment that we're also got out on consultation with our walking trail strategy, and that is intended to identify all of our beautiful walking trails that we currently know about in the district, and seek advice on other walking trails as well. And that's not only for youth, but also for baby boomers and other people that are really interested in walking in our district.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David.
It also covers bike riding, horse riding, so any type of trail, not just walking. So this question kind of covers some things we've already talked about, where it says, I'm one of the many young people in this town who are so bored with the lack of things to do. All we want is to have a decent youth park area with a good skate park and a pump track that is more than just 3 mounds of dirt, and some proper mountain bike trails and tracks to ride around on. We are left to either just ride to the beach or go to the other towns where they have accommodated their younger population. And for those without a car, this is not an option. And what is wrong with the current library that I have never seen anyone using anyway, the same library that took away our dirt jumps?
I go down that track a little bit. The library is very well used. I believe that the Lions Club have been negotiating to provide for the youth as well, and they want to see some activity happen in where the current library is temporarily housed. What we're actually talking about is not so much indoors activities as outdoors, but if this person in the younger generation would like to connect with Julianne Rillstone, I'm sure Julianne would be pleased to have that person's support in help generate something. It's really good that they've connected with us tonight, and we thank them for that.
And just to add, I was just going to add upon that one is the strategic planning process that we just went through, which is from 2020 to 2030. There was a lot of feedback about skate parks and places to ride bicycles, places for the youth to do, and that is something that will be coming back to elected members to do. And I think it refers back to the mayor's, we need to plan for the head, plan ahead for the future. It won't happen overnight, but we do understand that some of these requirements are out there for the youth, and we will work towards them. And I thank you for that feedback. I love that feedback.
Okay.
More questions?
Yes, there are a few more to go. Now, in the past, both Myponga Sporting Complex and the Yankalilla Memorial Park have both received substantial grants for which both organisations are very grateful for. Given the current situation with a lot of sporting clubs being in hibernation, they would find it difficult to pay their fees, but the facilities still need to be maintained. How can council help address this dilemma?
Gary?
No, I think I'll...
do you take it, Nigel?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Sorry, Gary. What council have done is that we understand that a lot of community groups, including the sporting complexes, things are going to change over the next year. Instead of doing the usual allocation of saying $25,000 for the Memorial Park, $25,000 for my Ponga, this amount for this amount for these clubs, what they've put aside is $100,000. And what we encourage each of the clubs to do is to come and talk to council and let us know what their requirements are. We realised that it wasn't going to be a standard $25,000 payment because the fields weren't going to get used, the water wasn't going to be needed, the grass didn't need to grow. So encourage all clubs, all community groups to come talk to council, let us know what you need, and then we can draw upon that $100,000 to ensure that they get what they need.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm watching a twitch of the nose of Peter there. Peter, do you want to jump in and ask? Unmute yourself and talk about it. No?
Peter Filsall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I guess
you want to make a comment, Peter?
Yeah, I'll just make a comment. I was obviously the one that put the question there. At the moment, as I said, we're still paying a contractor to maintain the over and whatever. We haven't got, some of the clubs that can pay some fees. We still don't know where everyone is sitting. But it's just a matter of knowing, yeah, we don't want to be left in alerts that we suddenly lose our $25,000 worth of funding in a year when we definitely need it the most type thing. So it's just a matter of a little bit of security or how we need to deal with council to guarantee our future and the future of the clubs that use both complexes.
Nigel, will there be application forms or do they write in with a submission type situation?
No,
we don't want to make it complicated either.
No, we don't want to make it complicated. I think that we'll definitely be having a conversation with the Memorial Park and My Ponga. We know that in the past they've been standard grants. So I encourage you, Peter, once you work out the fees and what you need to come talk to us. But we will then later in the year present it to the community grants panel to have a look at not only those two requirements, but the requirements of all community groups. And with limited funding, we need to work out exactly where it goes. But the idea isn't to leave you out in the lurch, but just to have a conversation and not just automatically apply the funds in the following year.
Mm.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And also, I guess on behalf of, inner church council and whatever, there's the grants for the welfare needs and whatever. There's a lot of grants that are ongoing that we need to, somehow make sure that those organisations aren't left out in the lurch. Thank you.
It's all organisations, yeah. All organisations need to have those conversations.
The process probably won't be much different for the ones you're talking about with Carol's and the 5CYs and those sort of organisations, the school breakfast. The ones that Nigel was talking about was the ones that don't go through that process normally. We've pulled it out and it's just part of the budget process that they're in and have their money allocated each year. So you just need to go back to write in a submission during the community grant program.
Thank you.
Keep us informed of how your finances are going, Peter.
All right, there's a few more questions that have been pouring in. I don't know if we'll get to them all tonight. I'll just do a couple of quick ones and then we can come back to them at the end if you like. But I've got one saying, anything for Cape Jervis, anything at all?
Gary or Andy?
Cape Jervis, we're actually looking at the whole precinct down the bottom where Sealink is, and still talking to Dipti about that whole precinct. Sorry, this is cuts that we're having, the savings that we're having in the office because the lights keep going out. Yeah, we're looking at that whole precinct down the bottom and about the boat ramp and also about the finger. Corey's doing a lot of planting down there, where we're going to be starting to put more trees in and more plants with the local association down there. But once again, we would welcome anything to come through there. It's not something that's that we've ignored, but we like to, we would normally go down there with this roadshow and we would talk to people and they would give us feedback. And that's generally when we got some of the projects from them. But at the moment, it's those two that I'm looking at. So the foreshore and also what Corey's doing with the trees.
Andy, what about landscaping and street maintenance or bitumising, gutters, bit of beautification? Any of that in the process?
It's just the normal operations, Glenn. We'll go down, we'll do and we've actually started our approved winter grade down there now. People will start to see that going on. The beautification never stops. So, you know, we will be constantly looking at a Parks and Gardens project to make sure that the upkeep of the greenery and all the gardens down there are kept up to scratch. So, but no, there's nothing else, Glenn.
It's regular maintenance, regular services,
Correct.
but no major projects. But the one which Andy was talking about, which Andy and I seem to constantly work upon, is that foreshore, the finger, the boat ramp, the car parking, the whole area down there. And one of these days that project will come off and then funds will be spent. But there's a lot of groundwork that occurs behind the scenes before a project can get over the line and require funding.
Thank you. Tash?
Another one is, can you please advise whether the forums held early in the year, Nature's Best, Let's Plan the Rest, have informed or been used in any of the decisions of the budget?
Yes.
Chief Executive?
They are. We're still working on finalising the strategic plan, but there's a lot of things that we went through and we got feedback within the strategic planning process, which we contributed towards. Some of them were even included quick wins. I remember going to a school one day and them saying, we just want a volleyball court down at Normanville, and we went back to the team and we worked it out, and within a couple of weeks we had the volleyball down there. I think this budget, which is what Gary's been talking about, has been a let's get back to basics side of things, and there hasn't been the usual funding of nice to haves. These are the more the must haves this year. And then with the strategic projects, we're going out and asking those questions. But I'm looking forward to bringing back the strategic plan and utilising that. We did use it with the Normanville foreshore, that we do understand the importance of the Normanville foreshore as well. So bringing that in. Yeah, it's a great document which we will draw upon going forward.
Thank you. Tash?
Right, I'll just do this one question before we continue on. And then we can come back and answer the questions later, or I'll go online and answer them in the next week or so. So this question is, the district has a socio-economic profile that clearly demonstrates we have many ratepayers who get by on low incomes. Indeed, a higher than average proportion of sole person households. They need a rate cut at present. Can council achieve this if capital projects are dropped?
Gary?
It comes down to a question about long-term sustainability. And as we said in the presentation, the building of new projects does put upward pressure on rates. If the capital program for new buildings was not implemented at all, we'd be certainly in a stronger position in terms of rates. Whether we could actually cut rates, I don't know, but we would certainly have the ability not to raise rates beyond CPI in the future. Cutting rates would likely involve reducing service levels in terms of operations and asset maintenance. Modelling every eventuality is complex, and every scenario takes considerable time. But I just stick to, if we build new assets, yeah, we will need to fund them, but we think we can do that and be sustainable. But if we don't build them, yeah, we're in a better position.
Tash, it's good
I might just add there, Gary, if I may, that the percentage of people who use the hardship policy is not all that large. And if we do a cut of rates or have zero rate rise, that goes across the board, and everybody gets the advantage. And there's a lot of people out there who certainly can afford and should be, and they're very capable of paying for their rates. The district is a beautiful place to live, and it's got a lot of advantages, and some of those advantages have got to be paid for somehow. And it's, like Nigel said, it's a tax. It's something that the state government expect us to do, is to provide for the community, and they keep lumping stuff onto us as well, just as a little bit on the side. But our property values over our whole district is double that of the state average, and because of that we miss out on government assistance by the tune of something like $500,000 a year. And so something else in this whole discussion is the way that we are viewed as a district, and that view is by the formulas that are used by governments, is that we're a wealthy district. I sympathise with you. I know your question, and I understand what you say, and I know what ABS says, that our social economic situation is lower than that of Playford, but we're not viewed that way in the scheme of things. And so when it comes to voting time for state and federal, make it an issue. I would appreciate it. Anyone else want to make a comment on that?
I just wanted to make mention of, you did talk about the hardship policy, and if anyone is experiencing hardship, contact Gary, have a discussion and see how we can help out.
Thank you.
We have a hardship policy. It's on our website. You can read it there, or you can just contact us, and we will take you through that. We do everything we can to help you, and we do have people coming on a hardship policy. At the moment, it's not very many though.
Thank you. Over to you, Tash.
Thanks. Gary, can you just flick to the next slide for me, please? So guys, now that you've heard all the background in relation to our proposed budget, it's time for us to get down some details. So this is where we'd love you to get your mobile phone or email, or again, you don't have to do this right now. You've got up until the 10th of June to do it. But the annual business plan is a balancing act for council with the delivery of services and projects for the community and the raising of borrowing and rates to pay for them. Have we got the balancing act right, or what adjustments, if any, need to be made? We would love you to either text your response through or email, or again, if you want to take some time to have a more considered response, you've got up until the 10th of June to do that. So we'll give you some time to do that, and while people are putting their responses through, we've got a little bit of time left. If anyone would like to verbally ask some questions or have some comments, the reason why we've been asking you to text them, like I said earlier, is so that they're actually documented and go into our Your Safe site. So if you feedback, we'd love you to officially put in writing through that. But if there's any questions you'd like to make, we can address them through our mayor. So feel free to sing out if anyone verbally would like to address us. You can use your hand emoji or wave at us if your camera's on.
I can't see everybody at the moment, so yeah, they can just make a voice appeal.
Yeah, I can see them. Well, while no one's jumping up and down, I might just flick back to the other page. So I've got one about Warrinna. So Warrinna Cove did not get a mention in the budget. Why? Council started with a walking trail up Warrinna that is being eroded by stormwater. The creek is overgrown with young trees, reeds, etc., waiting for stormwater to block the drains and destroy the road again. For months, the weeds are high on the medium strip, looming neglected. Warrinna Cove seems forgotten.
Andy, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, the walking trails are dear to my heart, to be honest, and it's sad that it's moving a little bit into disrepair. That was originally designed and built in part by my ex-depot manager, who sadly passed away 2 years ago. Him and I walked that quite a bit, and it was his belief that that should go in, because people were struggling walking down the road, especially in the evening, with cars doing the snake around there. So I will make note that it's under disrepair, and I'll go down myself and have a look at that. We did put a chair down the bottom for Glenn as a memorial for Glenn, looking out onto what was his favourite piece of land, which was the marina. And yeah, it'd be sad to see that eroding. I will go and have a look and see what we need to do. Everything else, the river is a constant problem, and one that we try and get in and maintain. Bear in mind, I've only got 4 guys in the Parks and Gardens team that can actually get around 750 square kilometres. It's not that easy with 4 people to actually plus do 2 projects as well. But we will go down and have a look at that periodically. But once again, it becomes a maintenance issue, and one that just sits on our books as well as everything else in the district. It's a really interesting one that was designed in a way that would never be designed that way again. I can't understand why it was designed like that. There was a theory around some superstition, but you just wouldn't design that road again because there's too many breaks where the water can shoot across and damage the road. But we're left with that, and I believe it used to be a state road, Glenn. It was state government built that road and handed it, thankfully, or not, to council to maintain and manage, and that came with the river. So yeah,
Right.
it's not going to be easy.
I might just add there, Andy, I think the last time it actually flooded, there was, after that, there was some investigation into either killing or burning of those rushes to keep it a bit free. And if I remember rightly, NRM were a bit anxious about that happening. They didn't want it to happen. It needed to be left alone and let nature take its course.
That's correct. They also look at it as a natural filter for silt that comes down from the top, from farms and from land at the top. So they're always reluctant to do anything like that. Certainly burning anyway. But yeah, I will have a look at it. But once again, it'll have to sit on the list.
Has a resident association started up at Warina, or is that just a rumour or that I heard? Or I know Janet Jones had something to do with one down there at one stage, but
Yes, it started.
Would be good.
I think the question is fantastic because that it just refers to the balancing act that we've got to do. And there was a question from Cape Joe's before about what we're doing down there. And I think that as we get back to basics set of projects, it is the balancing act of how do we keep rates low, which answers the question of the other person with people doing it tough, and how do we not do brand new projects for certain areas, which is the balance of, you know, the renter question and the rates question. How do we do that? So, and this is what we've got to balance going forward.
The 9 of us have got that job to decipher, and this information is recorded and will be in the agenda, and that makes them extremely long, but we can refer to it as we deliberate over this. Further, Tash?
I can't see anyone waving to say anything verbally, but one I'll note off the site, it says it was claimed that an outcome of last year's township consultation demonstrated a demand for walking trails, drop the library, surf life saving club and many other projects, develop a coastal trail from Maiponga to the Cape. How many visitors would this bring to the region? I'm not sure if that's an actual question or more of a statement.
No, it's great feedback.
I'll go back and here again, suggestions come up and they take a while to get mobile. During the last state election, the standing member for or the candidate for Mawson, the Liberal candidate for Mawson, was actually working on that to connect with Alkaparinga and to come down all the way down to Normanville, with the thought of then going on from there. So these things have been suggested, and we actually put a fair bit of time, the Chief Executive put a fair bit of time into providing information and ways it could happen for that candidate. It also ticked a lot of our boxes because of that exact question. We get them all the time, but we got to fund them somehow. The other one is the walking trail from a Bungala house down to the Normanville foreshore, and upgrading and looking after the Bungala. I'd love to. We've tried it. We've got there. We've had people from Onkaparinga Council come down and have a discussion with us of how they do it.
What I might just put Andy on the spot and ask him to just give an update on the Big Gorge walking trail as well, which we'll work on this year.
Yeah, that's something that again has been a 2-year project, and this year we're starting to generate some action there. We did have a bit of a discrepancy with some private land and what should be public land or council land. We've overcome that discrepancy now, and we're starting to look at putting some culverts in across the river, and then put a walking trail across those culverts, which will then take up, if anybody's been down Big Gorge, it's a beautiful walkway, and then go right down to the ruins at the bottom, and then hopefully, if we could ever get round to the waterfalls, that would cap it off completely. But that's a project that yeah, we've been working on for quite some time. It's stalled at the moment due to rain, because we've got water coming down the river. It's quite a lot, and we're just hoping for a few clear days, and then we can get cracking again.
So walking trails continues to be a priority, and that's
Absolutely,
the one that we've been working on in recent times.
That particular trail starts at Garnet Kelly Park and goes off from there. Yeah, the Carrakalinga ratepayers have been talking to us about a walking trail from Carrakalinga North through to Normanville. Now, some of that's already in place, but yes, there again, it takes a bit of time. And how do we get them along the foreshore, along the Esplanade? So, yeah, it's certainly a priority. We can't do it all. The administration have got, I don't know how many balls in the air at any one time, and it's pretty interesting for a person like myself being in this chair and involved with them, not so much on a daily basis nowadays, but certainly before, and it's just amazing what keeps coming through. So not forgotten, please keep it in their forefront and talk to your elected members, and yeah, we never know what might happen.
I think
the project might get put aside because of, for some reason, and it'll come to the front of the priority list very quickly. It can happen. So that's it. Nigel, you were about to say?
I think Peter had a question. I could see.
Peter?
Yeah, Glenn, thank you. Last year, the state government, in their wisdom, allocated something like about $6 million towards the upgrade of the Hyson Trail, and the council decided and I think they reallocated money for the road maintenance program to do up Range Road West, Dogtrap Creek and Ten Rock Road, which, they did a good job of upgrading the road, but I think it cost council about $1 million. My comment would be, why didn't the federal or the state government contribute to that upgrade? Because that road, whilst it services some residents out there, it was mainly done to service Deep Creek Conservation Park and the upgrade of the Hyson Trail. Why didn't the council go back to the state government and ask them to fund that upgrade?
I
could make a couple of comments, but perhaps Nigel or Andy would like to comment on that. Andy?
I did, Peter. I did go to them. I got a big fat no, sadly. But I'm continuing bashing them on the head with this one, because I think there should be at least one road that's sealed all the way through, I think. And I think if I can even just get a bit of a snip on that, I think we'll be moving forward. And that road is we picked the shortest route from Range Road in, which is probably Dog Trap, or through that way. And then yeah, I think we've ticked that box. But at the moment, I was getting crickets, I'm afraid.
It's the same with forestry, with all their trucks going into the Second Valley Forest. We try to get state government contributions towards that and won't come to the party.
That's correct, yeah. Tapanapa suffered quite a bit on that issue, and we're spending a bit of money as we speak on Tapanapa again, because we've had some damage on that road. So, but yeah, I concur with you, Peter. State government really would have been, it'd been really helpful if it had come to the party so I could seal all the way through, even down to Blowhole. You know, that would have been fabulous, but sadly not the case.
Andy, I'd just like to clarify the cost of last year's resurfacing of that road down to Goondaloo. I was in the impression it was about 350,000.
Yeah, you're not far off, Glenn. It wasn't as high as $500,000. It felt like it. Sadly, it wasn't as high as that. But yeah, it was around about the 300 mark.
Yeah. What the state government say, Peter, is that's a contribution from the local community, and that's encouraging us to put money in. So yeah, I confer with you, and I fully support what you're saying, but yeah, blood out of a stone is a bit hard sometimes.
Yeah, I'd say that 80% of that benefit went to non-resident people, unfortunately. But
correct.
Yes, yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I console myself sometimes by saying when I go to another district, I'm using someone else's rates. Someone else's rates paid for the facilities I'm about to use, and so I don't know whether I'm right consoling myself like that or not, but yeah.
That was my argument, Peter, about going to state government. The fact that over 90% of the vehicles using them roads are not our vehicles, and them opening up down the bottom end, which is beautiful, causes me problems on the road. And that was my justification to go and ask the question, but sadly I didn't get anywhere this time.
So Tash, how are we going with our questions?
There's a few more coming through. A lot of them are feedback. So given the time that we're almost at 8 o'clock, and I've already seen there's people dropping off of the meeting already, I suggest, unless anyone has any burning desires to ask a question in person right now, that I'll wrap up. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight. And thank you for providing your feedback straight into our Your Say site. I remind you that it's open. We are extending the period. It is open and now until the 10th of June. You can give your feedback online. You can write us a letter the old-fashioned way, or like you've joined us tonight. So that's been really great. What will happen now is once the consultation period ends at the 10th of July, we will gather all this information and provide it to our elected members within a council report, and the budget decision will be made at the June council meeting. So without any further ado, thank you for joining us.
Dash, I think Josh might have wanted to come in then.
Oh, Josh, would you like to say something, or was that a thumbs up?
No, it was just a thumbs up.
Oh, hey, Josh. I thought it was a different Josh that messaged us on on Facebook. There was another comment.
Good to see you on board. Actually, another one I will just put in, Tash, is that if people want to have a chat, the elected members are there for that. And like you said earlier at the beginning, keep it respectful, and because we're here to listen, and we've got to make that decision. So it can be by email or a phone call. We take it on board, and often we just send it back into council administration to pick up and collate with the rest of the consultation. So that's another way they can actually have a chat if they want to.
Well, thanks for spending your Thursday night with us, and we'll see you later. Bye.
Thanks.